Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 5:30, and I will call this regular work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. Our work sessions are informal, and we go directly to the items on the agenda. I want to also make it known that members of our public are welcome to attend in person. They may also choose to watch the meeting at burnsvillemn.gov/meetings or Comcast channels 16 or 859. The public can also participate through Zoom by joining us at zoom.us/join. More information is available on our meeting's webpage and in the council agenda packet. And now we will go directly to our first item on the agenda, and that is our community survey. And our HR director, Mike Tracy, is going to introduce our guest. And so, Mike, the floor is yours.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. We are here to talk about the community survey. So it was back in spring of earlier this year where we talked about the community survey and our plans for administering it this year. As a reminder, we do this every 4 years. We conduct a residential and a business survey. Our partner from Cobalt Community Research, William, is here. He's going to go into detail over the results of both the residential and business surveys. And obviously we'll stand for questions as well too, either during or after the presentation. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to William.
Oh, thank you. Is there an advancer for the slides?
Yeah, well, welcome, Mr. St. Amour.
Thank you very
It's
much.
good to have you here.
I appreciate it. So let me provide a little bit of background. So Cobalt Community Research, we are a 501c3. We're based over in Michigan, so we're getting a lot of the snow for you guys, so we're taking the bullet from you this time, but later this winter, we'll expect you to take it for us. Our mission is really to provide both research and education for local units of government. We focus mainly on small and medium-sized communities, and we do this all over the country. Why research matters? There's a lot of important reasons to do this kind of exercise on a regular basis. First of all, it's just a good exercise to build trust, to understand perception, to understand what it is that residents want. And sometimes what you hear when you're out getting milk, when you're out in the community, and you have folks that approach you with certain concerns, it may or may not line up with statistically what everyone is interested in. So it's nice to have this kind of pulse check to see statistically where are people leaning, what are the priorities, what are the kind of experiences that they're having, and where do you need to dive in and explore a little bit more in terms of continuously improving the kind of experience that folks are having. On the resident side, I like to drop straight to the bottom line so that you know how things went. And I'd like to start off by just saying the city did really, really well. This is something that also doesn't happen by accident. So I want to really recognize leadership, staff. There's a lot of really good things that happen to allow these scores to be as strong as they are. You're not perfect, so there's things that we'll dive into as we get into this more deeply. But you do need to stop and recognize the positive things that are going on. One of the things that we do with the results is we take a look at which of the experiences that people have are the most strongly related to overall satisfaction and also certain outcomes. And those outcomes are things that the communities care about. People remaining in the community, recommending it to others, encouraging folks to start a business in the community, volunteering, those types of things. And so some of the scores are going to have a stronger linkage with those kind of outcomes. Some are going to have a weaker linkage with those. So as we go through this, I'll be sharing that with you more. When we look at 2025, the things that were the strongest links to overall satisfaction were city management, the Parks and Recreation, sustainability, image, and Burnsville vision. Now, these are not scores that are necessarily low or high. These are just the things that are the most tightly linked with overall satisfaction and those downstream outcomes that I talked about. Very similar to what they were in 2021, and you can take a look at those. The things that people like the most when we ask them with an open-ended question, the themes that came out were parks. They love the parks, they love the location, they love the convenience of where everything is located. What they like least, there were a number of comments regarding some of the things going on with some of the schools. Burnsville Mall came up quite a bit, and then also roads. And roads are something that have come up with every community I've ever worked with everywhere. So that's just an ongoing thing. When we look at the most important services in terms of where to focus your resources and your attention, folks said fire and EMT, police, and parks were really the big things that came up. And those aren't necessarily the things that will have the most leverage on your overall scores, but as far as just an explicit priority, those are the things, the meat and potatoes, which is pretty similar to what we see with other communities. The most preferred potential future amenities, we asked them kind of wish list sort of thing. Farmers market came up, walking and biking trails, park restrooms, community center, those types of things. And when we looked at what residents would prefer to be funded through the existing budget, they prefer that you, I'm having trouble squinting, I think I need new bifocals as well. They want to really have you fund them out of the existing budget rather than new funding for these particular things, and we'll go into that in more detail in a minute as well. Okay. This particular chart gives you a bit more context. So these are high-level measures. There's a bunch of questions underneath of each of these. I realize it's a little bit hard to read, but the ones that are in green are the ones that are the most strongly linked with your overall satisfaction, and you've got your scores over on the right-hand side that show your 2021 scores and your 2025 scores and what that difference was. And really, for the most part, things were within the margin of error. So statistically, pretty similar to what we saw back in 2021, with the exception of economy, which was something that had a bit more of a swing to it. Not something you can necessarily control as well, but that certainly was a factor. But you can also see various other levels of comparison. You can see national for similarly sized cities, the Midwest and Midwest for similarly sized cities, and Minnesota similarly sized cities. So you've got a number of different levels that you can look at to give you context for how you're performing relative to those other areas. And you're performing well. So methodology, kind of boring, but kind of important too. So we did this in April and May. We sent this out to a random sample of folks using InfoUSA. We did beef up our methodology from what we did last time back in 2021. Last time we did mail and online. We also opened this up using text messages, so sending out text messages to folks, and also to email, sending out an e-blast to the folks that were part of the random sample. So we did do the random sample. It went out to 2,000 folks. We had a total response of 611. You can see that it was 541 back in 2021, so that was a nice bump. And then we could see a couple of different breakdowns between the random sample piece, and then we opened it up for any residents who were interested during the second wave, so you can see what that looks like as well. One thing that I do like to point out from a statistical standpoint is we don't intermix the folks that were part of the random sample and the folks who were not part of the random sample. We like to keep those two scores separate, because the folks that are not part of the random sample, there may be some self-selection bias kind of things. So there is a line in the crosstabs right at the very bottom where you can see how the non-sample folks responded compared to the folks that were part of the sample. For the most part, it's the same, but sometimes you see some things where issues are a little bit different between those two different cohorts.
The folks that responded, were they all Burnsville residents and Burnsville businesses?
Yes, that's correct.
That were, okay.
Yep. And when I look at the 611, these are just the residents at this point. I'll talk about businesses in a few minutes. We also weighed the results by ethnicity. That's the same way that we did it back in 2021, just so you had a good apples-to-apples comparison. And the details in terms of your response rates from the different groups, that's part of your crosstab packet as well. But it was very similar to what we saw last time around. You have a number of tools that are available to you from a comparison standpoint, so you can look at various local governments at the state, regional, and national level, so that gives you a lot of insights. You can also look at your scores from the prior year, in 2021, and you can also even look at scores from non-governmental entities. We do this in conjunction with the American Customer Satisfaction Index out of the Ross Business School at U of M. They survey hundreds and hundreds of companies, not only in the U.S., but internationally as well. So the ACSI is one of those economic indicators that's reported out quarterly by U of M. But you can dive onto the website, theacsi.org, and you can look up a huge number of companies or industries, depending on what your interest is, to see what kind of scores they have. And it's often interesting because, government, you're providing a broad package of services to a broad package of folks, but sometimes it's interesting to look at a specific bank or even a corporate bank and see what their performance is, focusing on a much more specific kind of market. So you can get some insights there in terms of possibilities for improvement. So this chart is designed scientifically to be unreadable, and I'm glad to say that we can always do that successfully. But the point of this slide is to point out how to read your crosstabs. And this is just kind of a little tiny picture of what they look like. And essentially every question in the survey, those are the columns marching across. And then across the rows, you've got your 2021 score and your current score. And then you have breakdowns by each of the individual demographic cohorts. And this is just a glimpse of some of the ones that we looked at. But what it allows you to do is, at a glance, you can see where did you score pretty high, so those are the areas in blue. Where did you score not as well, which are the areas in pink, and where is there kind of a mix? If you're going down a column for a particular question, and it's pretty much all blue, that means regardless of demographic group, people had a pretty similar kind of experience or they have similar priorities. If you've got more of a mix of the red and blue, that means that there are some differences with those demographic groups. And as you're having conversations out in the community, this is a useful tool for a specific question. Say, hey, maybe we didn't score as well with this particular group on this issue. When you're in the milk aisle, you can ask specifically about that issue and get much more actionable feedback than just sort of a general how are things going kind of conversation. So looking at your outcome behaviors compared to the benchmark, so your scores are the ones that are on the right-hand side of each question. So you can see your current score in the dark blue, and then the gray is your score from 2021. The greens are Minnesota, the kind of the reds and oranges, those are Midwest, and then your blues are the national scores. The lighter colors in each of those are the smaller index, so smaller community size. That's more of your true index in terms of looking at similar sized communities. Way over on the far right hand side, you can see that those particular scores don't have benchmarks, and that's because these were specific to you. So these aren't part of the benchmarking. A couple things I want to point out is, first of all, in many circumstances, you are at or above the benchmarks, which is a really strong place. So again, that speaks well for you. And also you can see the blue bar compared to the gray bar in many cases has gone up, either the same or it's gone up. So that's also a good sign. As far as things that are doing particularly well, a little hard for me to read them from here, but the second set of columns there, as far as I think it's remaining in the community. Yep. So that,
No.
Pardon?
Remain living here 5 years.
Yep. So that was your highest scoring area. So that's an excellent thing to have. It's because people vote with their feet. And the volunteering is the thing that's the softest. You're still above the benchmarks, but that's something that is not super high performing in terms of an outcome compared to your other areas. So one of the things that we do a lot of in this particular survey are these kind of bubble charts. And this does a bunch of different things. First of all, on the vertical, it's plotting your score on a scale of 0 to 100. You can see that it's not the full scale. We zoom in on that so you can see the relative differences. And then across the horizontal is the relationship with overall satisfaction. So things that are further over on the right side, those are the things that are more closely linked with your overall satisfaction. The things on the left side are less closely linked with your overall satisfaction. Where you see the numbers, the labels, those are the current year numbers, so you can kind of see which direction the line has gone. Has it gone up or down? And the tail end, so the end without numbers, that's your 2021 scores. So as you look at this, if you look at the lower right-hand quadrant, those are your strategic weaknesses, relative weaknesses. They're below that horizontal line. That means these are things that are having a kind of a downward pressure on your overall scores. And then the things that are in the upper right quadrant, those are the things that are having more of a positive impact on your scores, pulling your scores up. Both things on that side are strategic, improve those and your scores will go up and those outcome behaviors will go up. Over on the left-hand side, those are things that are much more optimized in terms of how things are performing. It doesn't mean that they're unimportant, it just means that they're not linked mathematically as strongly with those particular outcomes and with overall satisfaction. I always like to point out the fire and police for a couple of reasons. First of all, the fire scored higher than police. I know there's always a competition between the two, so the fire department has a little bit of a higher score there. But also, you know that they're important things. We've seen from other areas in the survey that those are important. What this is showing isn't if they're important or not important, it's just showing, again, that relationship. The analogy that we often use is like buying a car. When you're buying a car, you're looking at things like the price, the safety, the styling, those kind of things. It's not whether or not it has a steering wheel. Is a steering wheel important? Yes, but it's not the thing that differentiates you buying one car from another car, and that's really what this chart shows. It's not going to advance from my computer.
We need bigger TV monitors for all these.
So this
I
next one is
small.
looking at community
I
image.
know, and
These are becoming hard to read.
Looking at community image, so these are kind of a sense of brand. So again, we have a similar sort of pattern of how well you scored compared to the benchmarks. You scored above the benchmarks in most cases. In many cases, you also improved your score over 2021. You do have a few areas that are difficult to read. I want to bring them up on my computer so I can look at them a little bit more easily and talk about them. Bear with me just half a second.
when you're looking, it's Burns.
So what we see as your higher scoring areas are things like an enjoyable place for older adults that scored very well. Also, the enjoyable place for children scored very well. Areas that were a little bit softer is a safe place to walk and bike at night. And also, we had a bit of a lower score with physically attractive and curb appeal. So a couple of things to keep in mind there.
What's the one on the far right?
The far right,
On the,
Place that is.
you can't see it when I wiggle the mouse.
but as inclusive and,
Celebrates diversity.
yeah.
Is
Yep.
that, the final bar is the current year, right? So that is.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
so the last 2 years, actually, that statement and a couple others is very high.
Yeah, you
And so
scored
the-
well and it's
yeah,
stable.
and the Burnsville bar is on the far right of each category.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep, it's that dark blue
2025.
Yeah,
one. That's exactly true.
2021 is the line next to it, the
Next
Yeah.
one, right.
Great one.
You score higher than
Then-
in virtually every category against all the comparisons, it looks like.
Against
here
that,
anyway.
against the index, yep, yep. So you're in a very strong position. So again, going to these scatter plots, what you see here are each of those individual questions within image. Same sort of thing, your current year is where the label is. And you can see that the cluster for the most part is over on the right-hand side. Some of them are above the line, most of them are below the line just a little bit, so they are pulling the score down a little. But you can look at which are the ones that are the strongest drivers, and which are the ones that are particularly low in terms of prioritizing which particular scores to go after to improve through your next cycle.
What are the ones that are above the line? There's 3 or 4 there.
So the ones that are the
Can't read
highest
it.
there,
like
they
102
came from the chart before, has the same
169.
sort of, it's the diversity.
Yep.
It is also the enjoyable place for older adults and enjoyable place for children.
And Mayor and Council, I have just sent the presentation to you all, so
Thank
you can
We can zoom in.
zoom in. Yep.
Yeah,
City management, this is always one that, again, has a lot of data to it. Again, we see that the pattern is the same that we've been seeing in other areas. So your scores are strong, and for the most part, they've improved a little bit over 2021. Areas that were particularly strong, let me scroll over so I can read what the names are, just a second. So when we're looking at city government, Your highest scoring areas are fair and respectful interactions with residents, level of professionalism that the staff have,
Yeah.
and maintaining a website that meets needs, having employees who are well-trained, having leaders who are trustworthy. So a number of things that are very key. And
Yeah.
again, you're well above the benchmarks. Your lowest scoring area, as far as things to keep more of an eye on, spending dollars wisely and enforcing appearance and safety codes, both residential and business. On the spending dollars wisely, that is something that we consistently see low with most communities. And it is not an issue of making poor spending decisions. It's a matter of the communication of those spending decisions not being as good as it could be. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is there may be times where you don't really get into the guts of how these kind of decisions are made. Also, folks, their eyes tend to glaze over when you start getting into those financial decisions, and they just kind of have their own perception of what government does that they overlay on whatever it is that you say. So that also is something that has a negative pressure on that. But communication is one of the keys to taking the score and lifting it. Is there a question?
Yeah. Any questions? No.
Looking at the impact, again, these are all over on the right-hand side. These are things that are pretty impactful. You can see that center line going through, so a lot of your scores are above. Generally, things have been going up, so the slant on those lines is in a positive direction. But again, diving in and looking at those areas that are below the line, those will tell you what your strategic weaknesses are. So again, they're really good scores, but they're lower than the rest of your cluster, so those are things to look at. And the things that are above the line, those are strategic strengths, things that you're doing well, and if you do them even better, that will continue to have leverage in lifting your score. This next graph is just giving you a little bit more detail in terms of how did people respond to the individual questions, broken down by how frequently they contacted the city. And for the most part, if they didn't have any contact with you at all, they were pretty happy. And the more contact they had with you, typically their results are a little bit lower, with the exception of the professionalism of staff. So as they work with staff, the more they work with staff, typically they continue to have a high impression in terms of the professionalism and the service level that staff provide. We did dive in and look at how people receive information, how they prefer to receive information, and you can see what that looks like there. So the highest one is the newsletter, followed by U.S. mail, and then followed by email. And there are some significant differences there by age. So we do provide a breakdown of each of those by age group, because depending on what your messaging is and who the group is that you're trying to reach, you want to make sure that you're using the right communication mode to reach that particular group. Looking at the economy, so this wasn't one of your drivers, but I did add it in because some of these are drivers and it will become more of a driver over time as we're in this particular cycle. Again, your scores are above the benchmarks, but you can see that they've started to soften up a bit compared to 2021. So those are some things to keep in mind, particularly the questions around jobs. So the quality of jobs and availability of jobs is a little bit lower. The housing, that one's actually held up pretty well as far as maintaining the value of their home. Affordability of homes, that's been a challenge all over the country, and that's something that typically it's not as strong of a driver for current residents. The concern behind that often lies in either someone with a business and their staff not necessarily being able to afford to live in town, or people who have kids that grew up here and they're no longer able to afford a home when they want to move back home again. So again, just looking at the impact of those, you can see that the economy is below the line, so it is having a downward pressure. And then you can see what are those particular questions within it that are the strongest drivers. Parks and Recreation, again, above the benchmarks. Again, a little bit of a softening going on.
Strength of local economy.
When we look here, we can see that all of the park scores are pretty clustered, and they're all in that upper right-hand quadrant, which tells me that parks really are an important strategic asset in the community. So not only is it something that helps you helps your residents be happy and recommend the city to others and so on. Also, parks can have a pretty significant economic benefit as well, because you're drawing people from outside the community because you've got a good offering here. Your questions around sustainability, pretty much the same as they were back in 2021. A little bit of softening, not enough to be statistical, but you can see that some of those columns did drop a little bit more. So again, I'm trying to indicate with my mouse, I'm used to doing this online. Let's see, the third one from the right, the quality of
Tree management?
tree management. That one dropped a little bit, as well as the one that's right next to it, the sustainability information.
Initiatives and-
Yeah, so those are a couple of areas that, again, you could look at what is your actual performance of them, or is it communication around those? Those are questions that staff can think about. And then looking at the impact, you can see that some of these are more impactful and are over on the right-hand side of that center line. Overall vision, very similar to what we saw back in 2021. So pretty solid. People are definitely engaged with the vision. It resonates with them, particularly when we look at this next slide, and you can see everything on the vision is over on that right-hand side. So you are aligning clearly with the things that people care about. And also, many of those lines are sloping in an upward direction, which is also encouraging. Getting into some of the questions around budget and planning. Very similar pattern when we look at what are the most important services and programs. So you can see the fire and ambulance is way up there, along with police and parks. The trails and sidewalks also are a pretty high scoring area if you were to have a fourth place. Looking at potential future community amenities. So you can see what that looks like as well. I'm going to jump over to my other screen here just so I can read it more easily. And so the things that have the strongest level of support here are around sidewalk improvements, walking trails, traffic enforcement, and park restrooms. Then we took those and we looked to see how supportive are people in terms of basically spending more on those, what their approach would be. And for the most part, people just want to keep the budget the way it is in terms of funding those. So they're not especially excited about spending a lot more on those. For the most part, there's a few exceptions, but you can look at that as part of your planning process. And then we had an open-ended question asking them what kind of businesses they would like to see added to the community. And the way that this works is it's an open-ended question. The things that came up most often, the words that come up most often are the largest words in this cloud. And then we take a look at what are the themes around those words. So you can see around restaurant, they want to see more quality dine-in places. So fewer fast food, more places where they can sit down and enjoy it with their family or friends. Retail, they'd like to have more retail option. The mall came up as part of that conversation. They like independent shops, those kind of things. And then Burnsville Mall came up as well. So looking at things that you might be able to do over there. There's a lot of things to consider. One thing on any of the comments, because as you go through these results in detail, there's a lot of comments that are part of your packet. You're going to see some comments that might come up 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and those are going to tend to stick in your head. But I do want to point out that those comments are from like 600 people. So even though when they're repeated a few times, they're going to stick in your head, just keep in mind that the comments are not really statistical. They just give you a little bit more insight in terms of why did people respond the way that they did. So if someone if it shows up, a handful of times over and over again, that repetition sticks in your head, or if someone is particularly eloquent describing things, that'll stick in your head, or if someone is particularly passionate, whether positively or negatively, that tends to stick in your head as well. So just keep in mind that we're storytelling animals, and the comments are really useful, but they can kind of hit our blind spots in terms of how we interpret the data.
Some pretty nasty stuff in there, too.
There can be, yep. Not as bad as Facebook, but
No.
there's definitely a few comments. There's also a lot of encouraging comments, too.
True.
Okay, so we talked about what businesses they would like to see, so I'm transitioning now over to the business study in terms of how that went. So again, looking at the bottom line, you did really well. You really maintained from 2021. Some things are a little higher, some things are a smidge lower, but for the most part, it's within the margin of error. You're outperforming the benchmarks again, which is, again, a good thing. One of the things that we saw both on the business side and on the residential side is in 2021, there's kind of a COVID honeymoon period. People were just happy that folks were still in business, that the city was still providing information, that the city was still doing things. And for a lot of our clients, we saw the scores from 2021 to current drop. We didn't see that with you guys, so they held pretty firm, which is actually a really encouraging thing. When we look at the things that are the big drivers, you can see the 25 compared to the 21. Regulatory environment, the place/location that I'll go into a little bit more detail, but as far as the site of Burnsville as a business location, local government management, your vision again, and the collaborative environment were the big 5 things that popped up, and we've got questions around all those. We wanted to get a sense of how businesses are doing. What are they feeling? Are things good? Are they bad? And they said that they're generally optimistic. So they're either, going to be stable, doing the same kind of level of business and same kind of employment as what they've seen in the past, or actually improving a little bit. We asked them what Burnsville does well, and they said community involvement is one of the things that Burnsville does well, that there is good road signage, good access, and that there's generally a feeling of safety in the community. So those are all things that shine through the eyes of these entrepreneurs and businesses that you've got. When we look at the most valuable potential future services, the things that came up were really dealing with the information on grants and loans. So not so much getting grants and loans from you, although I'm sure they'd be happy to, but more along the lines of understanding when those opportunities are available and what they need to do to go after them. Because these business owners, they've got a business to run. They don't know how to deal with grants and all of that. And so the city being able to provide them with that information and some help is something that has a lot of value for them. Other things that they would like to see, information on annual fee changes and safety workshops with police and fire. So, as you guys are out there, what are the common vulnerabilities, either from a police or a fire situation, that they might want to be mindful of to help them avoid some of those situations? Because while they like your police department and they like your fire department, they'd rather not have them come to the place and do business there, because that's means something bad happened. Most respondents, when we're talking about regulation, they would like to keep the same level of regulation that there is today. There are a few things that a plurality, but not a majority of folks said that they would like to see change a little bit. One around them is restrictions around blight, disrepair, that kind of thing. They would like to see more restrictions around that, just to kind of clean up some of the areas that need cleaned up. And then the other area is door-to-door solicitation, something that might be a little bit harder, but businesses tend to get hit a lot with people asking for money. And while they're happy to help, it starts to get a little bit relentless at times when every day you've got multiple groups knocking on the door. Methodology. So similar to the way that we did it with the residential, we pulled the information again from Data Axle, which used to be Info USA, about 2,000 businesses. We ran the collection by mail and email in March through May. Businesses could respond either by paper or they could respond online with an ID number, so that we made sure that they only responded once, and to help us manage reminders. We heard from 229 businesses, which is better than what we saw in 2021, which was 207. That gives us a margin of error of about plus or minus 6.1%. We also had 7 folks who weren't part of the sample that participated. We lumped them in with the overall results because there's so few of them that they actually didn't change the numbers. They weren't so different that they changed the numbers. So just to be aware of that. One of the questions that often comes up for any survey, either on the residential or on the business side, is, for our community, are these enough responses to be able to draw conclusions? And the answer is yes. So on the residential side, for a national survey to get plus or minus 5% of what 330 million people are thinking, you only need about 387 responses. So you're in pretty good shape. Same thing with businesses. We always, now, from a analyst standpoint, I like to see more. More is always better, but your results are very solid. We also looked at what kind of businesses responded, and that's in your crosstabs, and it's very similar to what we saw in 2021 as well. So when we're looking at changes, it's a pretty good apples to apples thing. As with the last survey, you can see your results over on the far right-hand side and how your results compare to other levels of government. There's not as many benchmarks on the business side, but you can see overall your scores are very strong compared to the other levels, with the exception at the very bottom of the ACSI overall, the national ACSI, which is a score of 77. And that's because that one is a mix of not only public sector, but also private sector as well. It's mostly private sector. And private sector almost always outperforms government because they're looking at a very specific audience target of customers with very specific services, as opposed to a city that's offering a very diverse group of services to a very diverse group of customers, basically. But again, pretty strong performance. When we look at the outcome behaviors, almost identical to what we saw in 2021. The big difference is that third one over that I can't read offhand, so let me change over to this slide so I can see it. So that's support the current local government. So that one is a little bit softer than what we saw, but still it's right in line with the other ones. So pretty solid scores. As with the last survey, we took all of these and we plotted them out. So again, your scores are on the vertical. The impact in terms of the relationship with overall satisfaction, those outcomes are on the horizontal. You can see that a lot of these lines really are horizontal. So from a improvement standpoint, going up and down, they didn't change a whole lot, but a lot of them did shift a bit either to the right or to the left in terms of what their importance is. And so that's something to be mindful of as well. When we looked at the top areas on that overview slide, we took the 5 that were over there on the right-hand side. And so I'd recommend, as you get into your planning process, those are the ones that are the most useful to look at in terms of driving your scores up. Scores that are on the other side, both for the business survey and for the residential side, doesn't mean that they're unimportant again. It just means that they're not as strongly linked with those outcomes. There may be other reasons to work on things on that side, but they're not going to be improving your overall satisfaction or those downstream goals. Looking at place, this is one of the drivers. So you can see those scores softened a little bit compared to 2021. Not a ton, but a little bit. Your highest scoring areas are the quality of life and a great place to have a business. I'm going to scooch over so I can read them a little bit more easily. But again, those are pretty solid scores. And then looking at the crosstab, you can see, for the most part, pretty stable from an up to down standpoint, but some of them did become a bit more of a stronger driver. So those are things that you'll want to take a look at more closely. But there are a lot of things clustering over on that right-hand side. So those are the ones that you want to pay the most attention to. Collaborative environment. So those scores did go up. Again, not a ton, but by a little bit. And that's positive direction. And when I'm looking at those, bear with me as I'm looking at those.
Almost every one of those went up. Only 2
Yeah,
were
they all
even
went up,
and the
and
rest were up.
that's encouraging. Just having trouble on my side seeing them. Oh, thank you. Okay, so we can see the city's welcoming attitude toward businesses. That one went up in particular. And then we also see the involvement of Burnsville Chamber of Commerce and the involvement experience. Those are all scores that did go up quite a bit and are your highest scoring areas. One of your lowest scoring areas, Burnsville provided administrative and marketing support for businesses. That was one of your lowest scoring areas, and that actually did go up a bit compared to last year, more significantly. And then you can see the impact that each of these have. So all of them are over in that right-hand quadrant. So all of these are things that I would spend more time focusing on because these are going to give you more bang for the buck. City management scores, again, really strong. The things that were the strongest scoring is being well managed, having leaders who are trustworthy, the level of knowledge, level of fairness, ease of reaching the appropriate person. Those are all high scoring areas. The area that was the lowest scoring is spending dollars wisely again. And so that is something that, as I've mentioned, that's often a communication challenge to deal with. Looking at the scatter chart here, you can see that all of these are above the line and to the right. So these are strategic strengths, and doing more of them will continue to move the needle. Looking at your regulatory environment, again, pretty similar. We see a bit of a drop on the value of services that you receive for the local taxes that you pay. So that's one to pay attention to. It could be service levels. It could also be communication in terms of service levels. So either one of those might be the driver. Things that are scoring pretty well are the ease of processes to request local licenses, the ease of processes to comply with regulatory issues, and the ease of processes to comply with required inspections. All did really well. And then again, you can see these are on the far right side, and some of them are above the line, some of them are below. So these are things that you'll want to take a close look at. Your vision, again, high scores as we saw with the residents. Things that were marked particularly high is welcoming to all through community engagement. That was particularly strong, along with delivering high-quality public services with respect for resources. Areas that were a little bit softer is a vibrant city, boldly leading, welcoming to all. And then also on the far right-hand side, effective communication, effectively communicating the vision and strategic priorities. And then we can see here, most of these are on the right. These are things that are on the positive side, above the line, that are pulling the score up. A couple of them that were a little bit low, 84, which is the effectively communicating the vision and strategic priorities. So that one's that's fairly easy to address, but that is one that you'll want to spend a little bit more time on. Then this one is looking at the regulations in terms of, do they want them relaxed, do they want them tightened, or do they want to keep them about the same? You can look at each of these really as a pie chart. So you can see the blue as reduced restrictions, that orange color being more increasing restrictions, and then leave it as it is in the gray area. If you look down toward the bottom, you can see that there's a number that have much longer orange lines, almost 50%, but not quite. And that's looking at the properties in disrepair. A lot of folks would like to see that tightened up a bit more, and then the door-to-door solicitation as well. And then, as I mentioned, we asked them, what do they think a year from now? How are they going to be doing? And for the most part, they either said, we're going to be growing or we're going to be the same. And so they're in a pretty stable place right now. Looking at potential future city services. So we asked this last time as well. The demand for the city services is relaxed for the most part. The number one thing is the grants and loan information. So while that did go down, that continues to be an area that folks are interested in because there's a number of interesting opportunities that are popping out at the state and the federal level that they just can't keep track of. They just know that there's things floating around, so there's opportunities. And then the other things that they're interested in, there's really three things that are kind of tied at about the same level. You've got the workshops, the information on annual fee changes, and the participating with the city on promotion. Those are all things that have a pretty strong level of support. Next slide. Again, just taking those and saying, if you want us to use tax dollars to accelerate improvements in each of these areas, and for the most part, they're not sure. When we're talking about one-on-one meetings with development staff, the majority say yes. And when we're looking at the grants and loan information, we have about 43%, so a pretty strong percentage of folks interested in that. Not very many people saying no to it. But then when we're looking at the next one of participating with the city on cross-promotion, a lot of folks who aren't sure. So if that's something that you want to do, spend a little bit more time talking about it and educating folks on what could be possible. We asked them how they want to receive communications from the city: mail, email, and the website. Those are the top three. Okay, that was the rocket tour through the data. At this point, I'll start pausing and answering any questions that you might have.
Comments?
Still, people.
Well, it's good to know that there's some consistency from 21 to 25, and that we're on target on the strategic initiatives. Yeah,
And really, by almost every measure, the city of Burnsville is doing not just marginally better, but significantly better than region, other cities, national.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest takeaways I have from this is having
And-
that comparison and showing that we really are excelling far better than our peer.
You are,
Yeah.
and when we show the
and
comparison
it's
slides,
consistent from 21 to 25
Yeah, it even
in
got
all
better
those
in
categories.
2021, right?
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. So, and again, it doesn't happen accidentally. So you've put systems in place, you've got the people in place for that to happen, because there's other communities of similar size and similar geography that don't have that story to tell.
okay. Any other comments? Well, William, thank you so much for
My pleasure.
driving all the way here in the snow to make sure that we have you in person, and we appreciate the work that you do.
I'm happy to do
Thank
it,
you
and
so
I will
much.
always be available. So like I said, our mission is research and education. So as you have questions, if you want to hop on the phone and talk about stuff and dive into it,
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that. So that's not a
Well, we
problem
have
at all.
some good information for us to look forward and plan for the next 4 years before you come back.
Yes.
Absolutely. And Mayor and Council, Mike has a couple of closing comments to that point, and I just express our team's gratitude for William. He's very much already helped the leadership team through thinking about what is our planning process really look like. So following measurement.
Yeah.
It's important to me, it's important to our team that we engage with the community, we engage with stakeholders, and use those conversations and this data to inform action planning to help us to be better and to better create experiences for our customers, for our residents, for the business community. So Mike has a couple of comments in that regard.
Yeah, before Mike gets there, I appreciate what you have reported, because one of the things is that we know the vehicles that our residents have rated high, and that is the bulletin. And then also our parties in the plaza where we can engage with the community and they have one-on-one conversations with our staff. So we have a good pathway forward for that kind of engagement. Mike, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. So as Greg mentioned, this is our survey work plan. The intention of this is just the beginning of the conversation as we talk about the results from this round survey. So measurement is where we're at right now. We've completed the survey. We're beginning to communicate the results. Tonight was kind of the first step for that. We'll begin communicating and sharing these results with the community here very shortly. And then, as Greg mentioned, we dive right into our focus, which is seeking input and having conversations with stakeholders, which includes our community partners, community members, as well as our teams here internally as we discuss and analyze and kind of process these results. And then the hope from that, or the goal from there, is to identify some focus areas where we'll then devise some action plan and begin measuring progress between now and the next 4 years. So when we go back out and do another community survey in 2029, hopefully we see some measurable results.
William, I have one question because roads was one of the least. And you said that you did the survey around April and May when all the cones started to go up. Yeah. Yes. And so, and this has been a difficult year with all of the construction. So I don't know, I think we take all of those factors into consideration because I think our roads are very well maintained. And so to Mark and his team, thank you.
From an outsider perspective, I've come through a lot of communities, and your roads are in good shape compared to other communities that I've driven through, including my own, which I think they're just going to till up the roads and just turn them back to gravel, and we might be better off.
And a quick note on that, one of the interesting things is the residents comment that they want more stuff, but they don't necessarily want to pay for it.
Yeah.
And yet that's exactly what you're seeing in terms of it's a MnDOT project and a county project that are happening, which, I mean, yes, the county one's kind of through tax dollars, but it's a great example of kind of the juxtaposition of we find ourselves with what people want and how we deliver services.
Well, they want the roads to be easy to drive on, but the inconvenience is what drives their answer. So, but I think the actual experience is what I'm going for. So,
And the alternative is winter, so.
okay, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And to Greg and Mike and our team, thank you so much. We appreciate and are grateful for the work that you do in service to our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. The next item is the horizontal infrastructure study. And Mark, this is yours. And if you would introduce our guests who have written the report.
All right, good evening, Mayor, council members. Right here, we have Amanda and Michelle from HDR. They've put a lot of time into helping us work this horizontal infrastructure study and risk assessment, and I'm really proud of the work they've done. The conversations it's really helped our staff have in terms of how we think about our system and the risks, and how we then work with you all to mitigate those risks. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Yeah. Well, welcome, ladies. I thought it was, you write very well, and it really understandable, a lot of technical words, but thank you for putting in parentheses what they mean and so forth, because there were a lot of different types of structures that we use, so. Especially from the beginning of when the city was a township to today, the different materials that were used throughout. So thank you so much.
So this is a complex topic, but very important to how the city operates and how your customers and residents kind of perceive the work that you do. So this study really came out of looking at all the infrastructure associated with your public right-of-ways. So this would be your roadway system, water utility, sewer utility, and looking at kind of strategies around how to understand and assess what you have and also plan for the future replacement of those in the best kind of scenarios from a cost perspective and needs of the systems. So we worked with the public works staff through a few workshops to really understand the existing data set that surrounds these three asset types, and wanted to hear the goals and the current programs in place with the city public works department, and then start looking at ways to understand the planning of the replacement, planning of understanding the conditions of those assets, and then prioritizing and eventually figuring out how to fund replacement and renewal of those. So what we're looking at with this is understanding that there are those multiple needs within the right-of-way. From a public perspective, we have the water system that connects all of the residences, sanitary sewer collection system, and then the roadway system. And each of those have their own plan and their own fund, but understanding how they can work together and really overlay with each other to know that you're making the informed decisions on your, what we ended up calling kind of the overall horizontal infrastructure of the city. So when we think about how the city was developed, there's often these kind of large influxes of development that occur. So the initial build out, and then an addition of a, large tract of development. And when that occurs, if you look at your infrastructure that was built at that time, all with the same materials and all the same construction methods, it's anticipated that it would all become obsolete or need to be renewed at about the same time in the future. Now we're talking 50, 100 years from the time that these things were built, but we're getting to that age with the city that some of these systems are coming due and some have a shorter lifespan to need to be replaced or replaced more often. And so what we're looking to do here is estimate the useful life of all of the three primary asset types. The gray is the pavement, red is the sanitary sewer system, and blue is the water system. And so based on when they were built, these are your assets, looking at when do we think they will basically become a need for replacement. And inevitably, where that pavement needs to be replaced and the sewer and the water are not going to be on the same block. They're going to be spread out across the city, and you're going to have these competing needs, competing interests, and it's going to feel like you're impacting multiple areas of the city to the residents. So we're looking for strategies and methodologies to be able to time up the replacements, make informed decisions about can we make it until the next mill and overlay, until the next road reconstruct to take care of that water or sewer pipe.
Can you answer a question for me? Because one of the things in really understanding how the Met Council charges us, so you have 246 miles of water system, but the discharge of sanitation is 201 miles.
Yeah. Yep, so
Is that,
So the water system, to be able to connect up all of the homes, just takes more looping and more kind of connections to get the water to the same number of residences versus the pipes that take the water away from the homes. It might just be a shorter length we can kind of use, yeah.
yeah, it's residents and businesses in
So
that
the-
246 miles.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep, all connections to the system, getting water to all of your customers, getting the water from all of your customers. It's just the nature of how the systems are designed that often the length of water main is greater than the length of the sewer pipe.
Discharge
Right,
for
it
the
doesn't affect your
sanitary.
kind of
Okay.
charges or anything.
Okay.
Yep. So when we talk about how we did the assessment and looked at all of the assets, basically tried to illustrate how understanding what you have and when it was built could lead you directly to how you want, a strategy of how you want to replace it. So you could go from the far left to the far right and just understand that I built a pipe that had a 100-year life, so in 100 years I'm gonna pay for the replacement. But what these types of studies does and what Public Works has been developing internally is understanding the maintenance actions that are occurring, the projects that are already scheduled, and then the gray box there in the middle is sort of what we added to the assessment and study, looking at the condition of the water main, of the sewer, taking the pavement management plan data, and understanding how those all three blend into a risk score, and understand that if a water main needs to be replaced before a roadway, that can help drive your decision. And just any opportunity to add data into the chain of kind of how you go from knowing what you have to knowing when you need to replace it is how we term this asset management strategy. So within the individual asset types, the way we calculate a risk is looking at the likelihood of failure and the consequence of failure. So the likelihood that an asset will fail or need to be replaced comes down to its pipe, its actual characteristics of construction, what is surrounding it, how damage or wear and tear has occurred on that compared to its expected life, and then looking at the failure data that the city collects to understand if it's close to having a future failure. On the consequence side, we want to understand what's the impact if that asset were to fail. A lot of these are related to safety, level of service, and then the financial cost of doing that repair. And when you're doing risk scores, if you're needing to gather more information, you'd want to focus on that consequence of failure score and use a higher weighting of those criteria and a lower weighting of the likelihood. What the city is looking at in this study, since they already had a lot of condition information about their assets, was to target renewal planning investment strategies. So then you increase the likelihood of failure risk score and slightly lower the consequence score, looking for an overall 100 score on a risk rating scale. So after we know the risks of the pipes, how do we kind of get back to that first chart I showed of understanding the costs or when they would need to be replaced? We look at average unit costs both from a local level as well as regional and national construction costs. We're taking the anticipated bid cost of what a contractor will charge you to replace those assets, and then also making sure that we factor in planning, design, easements, all the other pieces that go along with projects and need to be planned for. So we took the water and sewer based on those regional bid analysis, and then took the pavement management plan as the true source for the pavement unit costs. So we plotted what the unit costs trend data showed us in terms of based on the pipe diameter going across the bottom right. This is just for the water and sewer system. Based on pipe diameter, what is the unit cost to replace or rehabilitate either the water or the sewer main? And we compared that to a very recent bid tab from the city on a sanitary sewer rehabilitation, and it just showed we had a really good correlation between that regional data set.
So put another way, Mayor and Council, we basically took the analysis and verified it against the numbers we've actually seen here in this city. And that was kind of how we did the check as we set up for this analysis.
Right.
Okay. So I'm actually the one that gets to build these fun models for the water distribution and the sanitary system. So this is maybe some of your charts that you were talking about. The system was basically initially built in the 1960s, and originally a cast iron pipe, and then we kind of transitioned into ductile iron pipe. And this all tells us a little bit about our system and kind of what we can expect it to perform if we know the age and the material. The gray is the concrete pipe, which we'll get into as well. So this is that first box that we were kind of showing the process of the project. The failure data is the second thing that we like to look at, and we do this for all types of utilities. We always look at the failure data because what has happened on our pipes previously can kind of tell us what we can expect in the future. The city has really good data. It went back to 1986. And so we could kind of analyze that to see how many breaks we're actually having per year. And you can see the trend line is going up a little bit, but that's to be expected as the system ages. We kind of expect the trend to go up a little bit. What we also do is we take that information and we benchmark it to regional and national levels so that we can kind of understand how we're performing. We also plot this against our replacement rates. And so Burnsville it's actually orange, looks a little red up there, but it's an orange dot. So our replacement rate and our break rate is actually lower. We're about like 3 times lower than the national standard, so we're doing really well there. 14.6 is the regional average. It's the green dot that's in the middle, and that is expected with the type of age of some of the systems that are surrounding us. If you can think of, some of the areas are older than the 1960s pipe that we have in Burnsville. So one thing we did kind of key in on when we had some of our national experts look at the data was our pre-stressed concrete pipe. These are our larger diameter pipes. Our break rate, or your break rate here in Burnsville, is a little bit higher than the national average, and that is very typical of when it was built. The concrete pipe was between 1960s and 1970s. And the design standards that we know of as engineers, and you can jump in here if you want, but the design standards that we know of, those pipes are usually a thinner wall, and so we kind of expect that. So just something to key in on. We kind of noted that as our recommendations to kind of watch that. There are some ways that we can kind of look at that pipe to see more of what's going on with condition assessments. And one of our recommendations is actually targeted condition assessments of these particular pipes, just to keep an eye on it. So that means if they are breaking, we're going to send that pipe segment away so we can kind of know what's going on. Is that a particular case of this one pipe, or is it indicative of other pipes that are of the same time frame? So we marry all that stuff together, our asset inventory, which is all that information about the material and everything, our break rates, we marry that. That's what we consider likelihood of failure. So is the pipe likely to fail? And we bring that up to our consequence of failure, like Michelle said earlier. And consequence of failure, I like to think of it as like where the pipe is in the system. So if you think about it, like, is it under a road? Is it deep? Is it under a building? Those are the things that make it harder to dig up, things like that. So we marry those two factors together in our models, and we can produce kind of our water distribution system risk. For your question earlier, when you were talking about why is the water distribution more pipe than the sanitary, you can really see it on the map. It's the looping that we have going on. And our buckets are bigger too. So this is the water, and sorry, it's hard to see, but water system across with our risk. And we produced a 70-30 consequence of failure to likelihood of failure grouping. We had some scenarios that we went over with the staff to kind of see how they felt about the system risk. And then we married it up with the unit costs that we kind of discussed earlier so that we can start to get these buckets. And this is our performance risk-based pipeline renewal budget. We start to put all this together on our big graph. The wave that you can see coming is because your system isn't old just yet, so like that's kind of coming. That's why you do these planning studies, so that you can plan on how to actually pay for the renewal of all that's going to eventually need to be renewed. Near term is our highest risk pipes, which we were showing in red and orange earlier, and so those kind of become our 5-year CIP type of buckets. This is a close-up of those particular projects and where they kind of land in the system. And our near term, and this is water distribution only right now. So this is kind of looking at it in a vacuum just right now. So we do the same exact process with the collection system. It's just we have a little bit of different data. So same thing, now we're at the 200 miles for the collection system. And instead of that cast iron pipe, we have clay pipe. Same time frame, around 1960s. And then that transitions out into PVC, which is the orange and the more common pipe. You do also have 4 miles of force mains, which are of interest always. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Just something that I learned from this background and presentation, that when you say the term pre-stressed concrete, it's not really telling the whole story of what that pipe is made of. It's not just concrete. I had no idea that there was
Wires.
Stressed coiled wires that have a lot of tension on them, a steel sleeve in between 2 layers of concrete, an outer mortar coating. I mean, that's not just a concrete pipe like most
Correct.
people would perceive when they hear pre-stressed concrete. Oh, it's a special concrete mix, right?
Right.
Do you have that slide that shows what, there's a cutaway that shows what the pipe is made of? I think that's,
It's on page 6 of the background.
I think
it's
back
almost
here.
striking that
Yeah.
that kind of pipe would ever burst, but I can understand when that pre-stressed wire weakens or
Yes.
breaks from corrosion or whatever, then, but these are also underground. There's a lot of
Yes.
pressure, being buried, right? So sometimes you look at this and go, how could that possibly ever blow out, right? Or have a breakage?
And they break catastrophically, so they explode
Yeah.
for the most
Explode,
part. There's,
right, yeah.
yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
Yep. Sanitary is easier, by the way. So, because it doesn't do
pressure.
that. There's no pressure, it doesn't blow out like that.
Well, except for the force mains.
Well, except,
Yes.
but yes, that's why I said, yes, except for the force mains, yeah. Instead of break data, we use the structural index from the CCTV. Another reason why sanitary is easier to kind of analyze is because we can get eyes on the inside of the pipe much easier. And the city has done a good job about getting CCTV, and we use the CCTV data as our failure data. So usually, what we're doing here is structural index. It's from 1 to 5, and essentially 5 would be kind of what we'd consider failure. It means there's a hole in the pipe or something of that nature. And so we score that similar to what we were scoring the water break data. So I like to consider our sanitary risk as a split model, and that means that any pipes with CCTV, I'm using the CCTV information, those condition scores as much as possible. If we don't have CCTV on it, then I'm using age and material as kind of a proxy, because there are pipes in the system that don't have the CCTV information. Marry that up once again to the consequence of failure, which will look very similar to your water distribution. It's still, if it's under a road, the depth, buildings, things like that, proximity to water, to get our total risk score. And so that's why the sanitary system has more green. We applied the 70-30 still because we're trying to target our renewal. And the bucket of money is money that we assess is basically lower because of the lining cost. You don't usually have to rehab sanitary sewer by digging them up. For the most part, we can line those, for the most part. Mark. So essentially, same idea. We're trying to find our knee of the curve, which is basically where we're expecting our entire risk to come as the system age come through, where our near-term actions are going to be so that we can focus our budget, our near-term budgets on that. And then kind of in the 40 to 60 range, those are our planning level, what we're thinking about in the future. Just sanitary, same thing in a vacuum, near-term and next 5-year CIP buckets and where those are in the system. And so you can kind of get the idea. We're dealing with a lot of lines on the map all across, right? These neighborhoods don't usually line up perfectly. We take that and we also looked at the pavement management system, which a lot of really good work had already been done on that. And you guys are getting 3-year inspections and using the pavement condition index to kind of score it similarly as the risk in water, where you have critical, poor, good, kind of that kind of idea. And this is from the 2024 pavement management plan. We kind of took that as kind of a basis when we're trying to overlay everything, and so this is just reporting kind of what was found in those in that study. And another view of it, obviously the pavements are buffered a little bit wider, but you can kind of see different spots of the red and the green and the orange and where the critical pavement is. Some of these I know are already in, they're currently being worked on. So you might recognize some of them. If it's critical, it would be refreshed whenever that pavement is done.
So that's a really good point. So our cadence now with this, we've talked about as a team, is at the end of the year, so roughly December, is where we'll go through and update all of our maps for pavement that's been done or for any projects, because we talked about doing it when the project starts, but the problem with that is the work isn't done, so it's actually not a reflection of our current status. And so by kind of saying, hey, let's focus at the end when the projects are wrapping up, it gave us a real clean line to reset every year to keep the information current, to inform, really future years out, not the following year, but after that kind of decision making.
And the main thing that we were trying to get after was, okay, how do you take the water and the sanitary and the pavement and all these different areas, how do you intersect them? And sorry, I talked with my hands too much. And basically our main focus was where those three systems kind of intersect. And so we kind of overlaid with a buffer the pavement to try to get these two buckets. So it was basically if the water and the sanitary system crossed the pavement, we would kind of consider that a pavement project. If it wasn't, then it'd be its own kind of utility project. And this chart, unfortunately, is really tiny, but essentially it's the logic that we went through to kind of overlay the three systems to try to get these high priority to low priority intersecting projects.
And the way I would think about that for all of you is really, we have all this great analysis. Ultimately, it has to end up in a budget, and this is the way we bridge from the data to making it happen.
I went too far. On the map, it kind of looks like this large chart with the highest to lower priority pavement projects is what we're calling it, but it's basically multi-utility projects. And you can kind of see how the red and the orange look differently in this map as opposed to just looking at it with pavement and a vacuum. The 12 highest risk projects are these ones that you can kind of see in the red, and we then start to put all of our costs to those projects. So that this is where we're starting to get to the budget and the results. Here's a better slide so that you can kind of see an example project. So that's one of the higher priority critical pavement projects. And then the lines that are intersecting are the water and the sewer, and they're of higher risk. So they're those orange and those reds. And so it kind of like they stack on top of each other. And so essentially that's what we're trying to get out of the plan, so you can stack everything up. And this goes to, essentially so that you can dig up an area once as opposed to multiple times.
And that staff can understand that just because you're doing a mile of road, you might only do a half mile of water or sewer. So it just gives them a better focus to understand how to group projects together, where to start and stop projects.
Yeah.
So kind of boiling everything together on the study, the pavement management plan was kind of our homework and study material before starting on the water and sewer, and realizing that by looking first at where pavement is critical because it becomes due more often, it has to get intervened more often. That's a valid strategy. It's very pertinent and works well for doing these kinds of replacement planning. When water and sewer investment decisions need to be made, it's sometimes hard to communicate how we as engineers came up with the priority or said it is time to do that water or sewer segment. This gives the criteria a lot of detail. Others can follow and realize that you're letting the data and the aspects of those assets drive the strategy. For water and sewer, risk analysis kind of helps you defend your decisions and prove you're not selecting locations for other reasons. And then as you get into the detailed capital projects, like I was saying, the 1 mile of roadway, but then deciding to do a half mile of one of the utilities, that's still this engineering judgment that we have to use as you plan a more detailed capital project, but it just gets you to the right spot. So thinking broader picture on kind of what we saw within the individual utility systems or individual horizontal asset systems, we came out with some other recommendations specific to each. One is to continually invest operating dollars into data management, and being able to have all of the break history, the pavement index scores, and your CCTV data was what really allowed kind of this planning process to occur. we want to complete those opportunistic condition assessments on kind of those higher risk, problematic pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipes, which are your largest diameter and represent the highest risk. For valve exercising program on the water main side, this just enables staff to have a way to check that a project area can be isolated the year prior to that project. So we've included that recommendation to make sure that those projects can go off without a hitch. And then for sanitary sewer lining, there's quite a bit of rehabilitation with CIPP liners that the city's already doing, and we recommended continuing that on those clay pipes. And then as you continue to look at CIP project planning, just keep updating this framework and this data set of all of your infrastructure to help make these decisions and set your budgets. With that, we'll take any questions.
Any questions, comments? I think for staff, this is great information, as you said, Mark, that you know what we need to do and how we're going to accomplish it.
And I'll take one step further, Mayor, and how we're going to operationalize that data so it
Yeah.
stays current to continue to be how we make decisions moving forward. I think, as I said, I think one of the study's great. One of the other real benefits that has come out of this is creating a visual way of the way we've been thinking and approaching the projects that creates that framework to sustain this into the future. And that's one of the things I'm most looking forward to with this.
Okay. Are we falling behind in getting the repair work that needs to be done? Because the recommendation, I think you said, was like 5 miles, and we're only doing about 1.
So the way I would frame that more, Mayor, is our goal is for a water main system standpoint is to average 1% per year.
Okay.
But some years will be more and other years will be less. Looking at our sanitary sewer system, we had a big year this year lining almost 4 miles of sanitary sewer.
Okay.
So I wouldn't ever look at it as a snapshot in time, but more, quite frankly, over that 5-year CIP timeframe. And so obviously one of the follow-ons here is an ITF study, and that will kind of continue to walk down that path.
Okay. You guys are on top of it. I'm good. So thank you so much, Mark, and your
Sounds good.
team,
Yeah, thanks to the team.
and to the team from HDR. Thank you so much. We appreciate you and very grateful for the work that you do for us. And thank you,
very much.
Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Okay, thank you. And now we're moving on to the rental licensing program, and our Deputy Community Development Director, Travis Bistodeau, is going to present. Travis, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. As you may recall from a work roundtable discussion last winter, the council asked questions about how our rental licensing program is administered across the city, and if there's a way we could somehow incentivize that program to encourage the good actors to continue doing what they're doing and spend more of our time on some of the more problem properties within the city. As you may recall, the multifamily rental inspection process and program is really managed across 2 different departments. Both the fire department and neighborhood services play a role. The fire department is managing and inspecting the common areas, while neighborhood services is conducting inspections within the individual units. So, and as a result, Chief Jungman and I are going to be doing kind of a tag team presentation for you all tonight, and happy to take questions as well. Just as a little bit of background, the purpose of our rental licensing program is to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the residents within Burnsville that live in those units, which is stated and memorialized in our rental licensing ordinance. As a result, we inspect and manage a total of 9,593 individual rental units across the city, We're inspecting and managing 80 complexes annually, and then we manage 984 single-family units. And that includes 384 standalone single-family houses.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, from a fire perspective, we inspect the multifamily units that have common areas, and we inspect those annually. As you can recall from the standards of cover and many presentations over the years, is multifamilies have been our largest life safety concern from a fire safety perspective, based on the data and our experience. We've also, thanks to our city attorney, have used the consent decree process for those that have had major life safety violations and have not been compliant. I would tell you from a fire perspective, the industry best practice is to be in these facilities annually, given the risk that they present and our history with them. And currently, we charge $170 for an initial inspection per building.
On the neighborhood services side of the equation, there is an annual rental license that is required from all of our rental licensed properties. All of our multifamily properties are inspected annually, but we're only inspecting 1/3 of the units. So after 3 years, we've been in every single one of those units in a complex. Single-family properties, however, are inspected at a once every 3-year cadence as it's currently designed. And then I'll also just remind the council that there were a couple of innovations that moved forward in 2024, which we have in place now. There is an annual property manager license requirement and an annual training requirement that was implemented in 2024. And there were new fees that were established as well back a year ago for serious violations, and escalating one additional step if those violations continue. And then just for frame of reference, on the neighborhood services side, our budget for neighborhood services and the rental inspections is projected to generate $580,000 in revenue in 2026. And our 3-year average neighborhood services expenses averages at $615,000 per year. But I think it's important to remember that neighborhood services doesn't just do rental licensing inspections. They're also managing all of those property maintenance complaints that we receive on an annual basis.
So this gives us the opportunity to kind of take a look at the ordinance, see what's out there, look at other places. So looking at the incentive-based approach, staff would recommend, if council were to desire this, that we would still charge the annual fee and not change the base fee structure, and that we would establish 3 categories of inspections, the highest being a grade A. Fire or neighborhood services would still inspect them annually, but they would only get inspected every other year. So 1 year by fire, 1 year by neighborhood services. They would move to a grade A after not having any life safety violations for 2 consecutive inspections. And then we would recommend reducing manager training to once every 3 years. We think that that training can be done every 3 years and still be effective. So this gives you an idea in a grid format. Currently, we're doing annual inspections in those common areas from the fire perspective. Neighborhood services is doing an annual inspection of 1/3 of the units. If we were to move to a graduated style inspection, we would do biannual of the grade A properties. So again, 1 year would be neighborhood services doing 1/3 of the units, 1 year would be fire doing the common areas. If they had any life safety inspections, they would go to or life safety violations, they would go to an annual inspection. And then those cases where we have multiple life safety violations and a lack of responsiveness, we would move them to a more frequent cadence, as we're doing now with some of those properties that are not being well cared for. We do think that there needs to be a safety valve in there. In our experience, the manager is key to this. Unfortunately, the manager doesn't always have the keys and the abilities to do all the repairs, but they are generally the ones that are bringing up issues, noticing issues, and addressing issues. So we would require or recommend requiring a self-inspection within 30 days, filing an affidavit with us with that inspection report, and then we would recommend fire and neighborhood services do an annual inspection within 6 months. That lets them get past kind of that honeymoon period, lets them get in there, because we've seen everything from a new manager coming in and firing all the maintenance staff and not having any maintenance staff, to a new manager coming in and hiring new maintenance staff that's competent, and there's the whole range in between. And so if we give it a few months after the affidavit, when they should know about all the property maintenance issues and life safety issues, we'll see if those are resolved by the time we go inspect it in a few months after. One gap we identified in our current ordinance is we generally inspect properties 90 days before their renewal, and we have places that don't have those violations repaired by the time their license expires, leaving us in a situation where we can't issue a new license because they have outstanding violations, and their old license has expired. And the problem is now they don't have a license, and if we wanted to take adverse license action on them, there's no license to take an adverse action on. So we would suggest creating a provisional license and doubling the fee, so their renewal would double, and also not allow them to lease any vacant units or anything that becomes vacant during the period of the provisional license, to make sure that we have a license status. One other emerging topic for us is assisted living licensure. So when the rental license was first established in the city 13 years ago, this current one, statute did not allow us to license assisted living facilities. Recent statutory changes allow municipalities to license 7 or more units, facilities with 7 or more units, which we have 10 of those facilities in the city. And we have also seen that we've had an increasing unnecessary use of emergency services at these assisted living facilities. So they account for about 9% of our call volume, and in particular, lift assists are about 14% of our call volume at these assisted living facilities, with one facility this year alone already accounting for 47 lift assists. So,
Wow.
Again, we don't mind helping out when they need it, but these are patients that should have an assessment done when they come into the assisted living, and their licensure is supposed to, or their assessment is supposed to figure out what the anticipated and unanticipated needs of these patients are, and they're supposed to make sure they staff for that. And some of these facilities are not always doing that, leaving them calling 911 to fill the void. And out of perspective, in 2020, we did 27 lift assists in our assisted living facilities, and in 2024, we did 82.
Oh,
So if that gives you an idea, context of where we're headed, and that's not with any new facilities, right? That's 10 facilities in 2020 and 10 facilities in 2025, 2024.
okay. Councilmember Gustafson had.
On this assisted living, that's really kind of state territory.
Yep.
Do they require any employment
Yes, staffing,
staffing based on who
Because
they
they're
have in
using
there,
you as-
all those different things?
So in my experience, working with MDH very closely over the past year, trying to resolve this, it's a very generic requirement that says they must staff appropriately to care for the patients. It does not have a staffing, requirement, and after filing multiple reports of this issue and filing plenty of reports and giving them the data, for instance, 31 of those lift assists are for a single patient at that one facility. There's been zero action, and frankly, MDH's response to me is thanks for the information. If we ever decide to revoke their license, it's additional documentation. And that's about the extent of the ability for them to enforce based on that. So yes, they are the designated state agency licensing these facilities, but their ability, in my experience in the past year, is limited on what they can actually do.
so they're using you and our staff to fill the gap of their staffing shortage.
In my experience, yes, that's what's happening. And again, are there situations where something might be awkward or a one-off? That's one thing, but when we see this repeated behavior, to me suggests that they're not anticipating the patient's needs, and there's a misalignment there. So, so again, we haven't yielded any changes, working with the state, and I would tell you, from a staff perspective, we would recommend including facilities with 7 or more. The state statute does not allow us to require rental licenses for 6 or less units. So what we traditionally think as group homes are off limits by state statute for locals. But we think we should include these. Require an annual fire inspection, but not a neighborhood services inspection. We haven't really run into livability concerns. The Department of Health does a good job of inspecting these facilities for those kinds of things. But we do think we should be in here for fire inspections. We had one of these facilities this year not have a working fire alarm panel, and they were resorting to buying parts on eBay. So
Oh, boy.
I do think it's worth us getting in there and seeing those major fire protection systems, since we do have high-risk patients in there, so. And in order to make this work, we do think that we should also add an excessive service consumption part of the rental ordinance. So we can't be more restrictive on the assisted living facilities than we are the rest of the rental rental facilities. And we think broadly we should put in the ordinance that it prohibits licensees from using an excessive amount of city services. And then that would allow the council to take any adverse license action if a rental licensee is consuming unreasonable amounts of city services. So from my perspective, if we were starting to get to those high numbers of unnecessary use, we could bring a case to you to determine whether you want to take adverse action or not.
Okay.
Yep. And I'll turn it back to Travis.
And then in terms of next steps, following our discussion tonight, our plans are to reach out to the rental license community here in Burnsville and let them know what the proposed changes are and take any feedback. And then we would bring some final ordinance changes to you next summer in July. The idea there is that we wouldn't implement until July because Neighborhood Services just started tracking our life safety violations separately, so we can use that as a metric to gauge how well our program interventions are working when we make changes to the program going forward. So what we'd love to do is have 1 year's worth of kind of clean data before we make any changes, implement some of the changes that we're going to discuss here tonight, and then evaluate the program going forward. And to that end, we'd like to customize the program however we need to, and then let it run for a couple of years so that we can come back and say what is working, what isn't working, how might we change this and make it more effective going forward.
Okay.
And with that, I think Chief Jungman and I can take any questions.
Councilmember
This
Gustafson.
sounds a lot like our old, remember our STAR program we
Yep.
had for the apartments
Yep.
years ago?
Yeah.
This one has teeth in it. The STAR program didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of teeth, and that's why we went to the changes we went to. I do have a question. Have you identified how many buildings would be A buildings right from the start, or are they going to have to earn that over the next year?
So, Councilmember Gustafson, the whole point of waiting until July for this would be, we have 1 year worth of data, so as we go do this next round of inspections, it would determine if they had no life safety violations this year plus that next inspection, then they would move up to an A with 2 consecutive inspections without life safety violations. So that we see a track record, it's not just a one-off.
So do you anticipate that maybe some of the Bs might work harder to become an A, so they're only being inspected once every 2 years instead of every year?
I would say that's the hope. I don't know.
I mean, it sounds like a good incentive program to do things right.
Right, that's our hope.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember, we did kind of workshop this at the staff level for a couple of weeks, and we do believe that there's a small percentage of rental property owners that would be incentivized and move from that kind of current B grade up to an A, or maybe there's a very small population that are from our perspective, A's currently. So we do think there are a number that would take advantage of this program.
And then to clarify, we're just talking about 4 units plus buildings. We're not talking about the single-family rental units right now.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember, that is correct, yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilmember Keeley?
Well, we've heard about this from Chief Jungman over the last year, and it's really concerning that we have assisted living facilities which provide truly essential care for people in need, but they cannot get by being improperly staffed and rely on our paramedics and 911 to fulfill their obligations as a business. With that call growth, where's it going to end? And when our paramedic staff is is out helping lift a patient. If there's other more serious calls coming in, the department's already stressed. We don't need what would be considered a nuisance call that the business should be handling themselves, pulling these folks away from other more serious calls.
I agree, because what they're doing is they're using our staff to manage their lack of staff.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, anything else? So what you have outlined, then you're going to be doing, and then you'll come back with the ordinance, correct?
Yeah. If everybody's supportive,
Yeah.
we'll follow this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So everybody, there is consensus here to move forward. Okay,
Thank you for the time and support. Appreciate it.
well,
Thank you.
we're all here working together to make sure that we service our community, but at the same time, not to take advantage of our staff. It's not something new. We've been hearing about how the assisted living are not staffed appropriately, and they're using our fire paramedics to do the work for them.
I'm really happy that as a full council for years, we've really been about safe housing for people and
Yeah,
their the living conditions and that. And I think we've proved that out throughout the years. And
yeah,
so thank you for
Thank you.
continuing to work on this and
Yeah.
improve it.
yeah. And truly, we're appreciative and also grateful for the work that you all do and for our fire paramedic team for the work that they do for life safety issues in our community. Okay, thank
Madam-
you so much.
Madam Mayor and Council, I
Okay.
just want to make sure I shout out, it's a collaboration between neighborhood services, fire, city attorney. It takes a whole team to make this happen, and we appreciate the support to have the tools to be able to do these things to make it safe housing, because we do find that very important. So, again, thanks for that, and I know not every staff in every city gets that level of support, so thank you.
If we don't work together, then we're not going to achieve the outcomes that we're looking for. So, good.
And I
Yeah.
just want to comment, I really like this proposal, in addition to that. I mean, the incentive,
Yeah.
as I've commented in the past, I felt the penalties for violators wasn't stiff enough, and we were putting too much burden on those who were outstanding performers that were getting, reoccurrent inspections, but were always coming up in great shape, and that becomes a nuisance over time to a
Yeah.
good performing business, yet we need to spend more time with the problem
Yeah.
performers
Yeah.
and penalize them for all the time that we have to spend.
And which means that the rest of us all pay for that poor performer.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, very well.
Very good. Thank you so much. Next item, this is our zoning code, and Mike Marosola, our planning manager, is presenting. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the city's zoning code has been amended numerous times since its adoption, with some of the sections dating back to the 1980s. Kind of fitting after the last conversation. So in 2021, staff initiated a kickoff to update the zoning code. However, it was paused due to departmental restructuring. Some of the code sections, like I said, date back to the 80s, and some other areas are outdated. It is not very user-friendly, and there's a lot of cross-references. So staff has recently started this process over again. The goals of this update are to improve organization and consolidation, enhance usability, modernize and use plain language, and updates to bring the code into compliance with current laws. Staff has proposed, one big part of this update is to reorganize the current code. Staff is proposing to go from 31 main chapters to 14.
I love that.
Yeah,
Oh, my gosh.
And those
It'll be easier for everybody to navigate.
that is the hope. And those 14 main chapters can be reduced into 5 main categories, which includes introductory provisions, administration, or 6, I should say, main categories, definitions, zoning districts, general zoning provisions, and special zoning provisions. This is also going to help us to undo the weave of navigating from section to section, as we'll talk about further here in a minute. We're also proposing to delete subsections that are out of date and unnecessary, relocation of sections from the zoning code to other appropriate city code sections, such as some items in our code currently reference right-of-way. I think those should probably live in the right-of-way area. So, as part of this project, staff has completely rewritten section 10.1 and section 10.2 to bring it into compliance with current standards, as a lot of this information provided in those sections is outdated. We're also proposing to update the definitions for allowed uses and simplify to clarify and show what's allowed in each district. Within your handouts or within your packets, we did provide an example of that one, attachment A will show that. We're also working to reduce cross-references. The formatting and numbering will be streamlined for easier reading and navigation and consistent throughout the code. So here's a perfect example within your packets, attachment B. There's an example that states that an adult daycare would wish to locate within the B3 zoning district. When you go to the B3 zoning district currently, it has a number of uses in there. I think there's probably like 20 of them. And then it also states that it allows uses within the B1 and B2 district. Adult daycares are not permitted in the B2, so you have to read through the 40 uses there. You gotta go to the B1, where there's an additional 12 permitted uses, and that's where adult daycares live. And then you gotta go back to the B1. So we're stopping that.
Good.
That is the number one thing. So we're gonna reclassify the uses in all these chapters to simplify them to current day's terms. So instead of having 70-some uses permitted in the B3, we're gonna narrow that down to maybe like 20 that are in current terminology, such as retail uses equals grocery stores, pet food stores. That'll all be combined into just retail. And there's an example within your packets in attachment C that shows how we're gonna reclassify those 77 uses into broader categories. So here's the proposed zoning district layout. This example on the screen is for the B3 General Business District, and all zoning districts will be very similar to this. The first off, we'll have a purpose statement, what's the intent of the district, and then the permitted uses, which will be narrowed down into the categories that are easy to identify and interpret and discuss with the public and staff. Then we'll also have our accessory uses, conditional uses, and then we'll have one other category that's not on here. Your divisional, the development standards will be included as well. So I like to call this the one-stop shop. So everything's in one spot. You don't need to go to other code sections. And it will reference, if you need additional standards, there will be a reference to those in these sections. This is our proposed process. As council's aware, we are just about to start off the comprehensive plan process. System statements have came out and we are reviewing those. So what now we're proposing to do is just reorganize and update some sections. As part of the 2050 comprehensive plan process, we will have to amend the code to bring into compliance with that update to the comprehensive plan. Because of that, we are proposing to do a complete overhaul or a comprehensive zoning code revision once we are done with the comprehensive plan, which is also helpful too, because we'll also be doing the community visioning at the same time. Both those documents will feed into the zoning code and will require updates as part of that. So this time we're just doing reorganization. We'll talk about schedule here in a minute. Also next year we'll probably do a major lift and redo the zoning, or excuse me, the subdivision code as part of our work plan for next year. So going forward, today we're here doing the work session talking about the zoning code update. On December 8th, we'll do this very similar presentation to the Planning Commission. January 12th, we will talk about red lines with the Planning Commission, go through our updates, and then we'll do a final one on January 26th, which will be an overview of our complete amendment to it, and then bring this back before the City Council on the February 17th for adoption. That's it for my presentation. That was really quick. If you have any questions, I'm here.
Any questions, comments?
A quick one.
Yes.
I like what you're doing. I like the fact that we're going to delay this a little bit while we do the comp plan, because, we started, as you said, we started this years ago. We had the community in first,
Yeah.
our citizens, and we were going to go to planning. But what I want to know is, going forward, let's say there is a PUD somewhere, will they be able to retain the underlying zoning, and so they don't have to come back to us to build something in the underlying zoning? Because we've experienced that with the mall, was one of them where that happened to us with the zoo. And I know others have had to come back to us. Their underlying zoning would take it, but they had a PUD, and so under the PUD, they had to come back to us again for a change. And I've always thought that, okay, give them the PUD, but don't take away the underlying zoning from them in case things change and they want to change to something that's already permitted in that area anyways.
Yeah.
Councilman, that's a great question. I actually was discussing this with our city attorney today. We were trying to look for an option of how to undo those PUDs that list specific uses and allow them the ability to use the underlying zoning code and not be just, lack of a better word, pigeonholed in that one use, and allow them the ability to utilize those other zoning district standards. We're trying to figure that out because there's a lot of them.
All of them.
A lot.
Well,
And
Burnsville has been very business-friendly
Yep.
and very flexible
Yep.
in how we approved all of those businesses.
Yep, and at this time, we are trying to figure out how to do that, because we ran into it on another case that's coming forward here, the Costco gas station relocation. There's like 3 PUDs there, so we're trying to unweave that currently.
And Hampton was one as well.
Which brought up the conversation, Hampton's another one, great example. So we're trying to figure out a way that we can include language that would still keep the intent of those PUDs, like the flexibility granted, but allow the underlying uses. So we don't have to amend them every other time. So it would be a big benefit for the business and the property owners in the community not to have to come in here to amend it.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
So you're untangling.
We're trying. We have, Jared and I, our city attorney, have not quite figured it out yet, but we're trying to figure out a way, because we do spend a lot of time unweaving these previous approvals, especially with the PUDs, because there's a lot of them, and sometimes they overlap, and it's not a clear path forward because they are generally adopted via ordinance. A lot of other communities, they're adopted via resolution, so they're easy to revoke, but here, since it's a zoning matter, it's a little bit more
Yeah.
involved. So we're trying to figure that out.
Glad to hear you're working on that.
Well, that's good. Any other comments or questions from?
Glad we're
I
cleaning it
think
up.
we're moving in the right direction, and I like that you're modernizing the language, and you're reducing the number of categories. It's wonderful. I think the developers and the businesses would really like that a lot. Easy to understand and navigate. Okay.
Thank you,
Under
Mayor.
business friendly, the current code might not really be the friendliest. It will be under this new model.
Yeah.
Yep, that is correct, Councilman Keeley. And we're also, as part of this, this would also reduce the number of PUDs too, especially use PUDs, because right now the code is so specific on the uses. It doesn't fit that definition. We have to find another mechanism. So that's why if we go broad and say retail, well, then you can fit into that, and we don't have to be so specific in the approvals.
Good. Okay, council, any objections, or here's the timeline?
me.
We're all good? Okay, I'm seeing noddings of heads, so that, yeah, okay. It's unanimous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate all the work that you all are doing. Yeah, this is a big job, because you're going back to to the 60s.
Yeah.
And modernizing the whole thing. And I like that we're coming up to a comp plan, and then we have the visioning process, and then you're going to work on the zoning code. So now that we have everything all together.
There's a lot of visioning that goes into, like you said, those documents, one's a visioning document.
Yeah.
But also, those will feed right into the zoning code, and we want to use that feedback that we receive and incorporate that into the zoning code.
Yeah.
So,
because you need to have that filed with the comprehensive plan. That's zoning code revision. Okay. Anything else? All right, thank you so much. Grateful for the work that you all do, and we appreciate you. Thank you so much. Okay, roundtable reports. Vince?
I have nothing.
Experience Burnsville was supposed to meet next week, but that meeting's been canceled until January.
Okay, Kara?
January.
Dan?
Nothing.
Nothing? Okay. I have nothing to report.
Wow, we got all five of us with
I
nothing?
clearly have nothing to report.
Actually, what time does the Packer game start?
It's already started.
7
I
o'clock.
have a few things I want to.
Well,
Okay,
Not that anyone's
Well,
paying
yeah,
attention.
wait a minute, come to think of it.
well,
The Packers opening drive
yeah.
is probably going to turn out to be a 3-point field goal.
So if there's nothing else to come before us this evening, we stand adjourned by acclamation. Good night, everyone, and thank you for being with us.